guest today learned public service at an early age. He was able to observe at close range the actions and gentlemanly responsibilities of his father, Alderman Joe Burke. He learned this in an era in which people not only knew their neighbor's name, but they knew their needs as well. One might say they knew when you were sick and they cared when you died. He brings an old-fashioned sense of responsibility with him wherever he goes. We know our next speaker best for his extraordinary grasp of government. He knows government. He is an author, foster parent par excellence, an excellent piano player, and a ward committeeman who carries his ward in astronomical figures and percentages. Dean of the City Council, Chairman of the Finance Committee, ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman, Ed Burke. Mr. Chairman. Have some fun up here.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you. Jay, many thanks for that very kind introduction. And what can I say about Sister Rosemary's invocation? Sister, we're humbled at your kind words, how gracious and generous you are. It's good to hear those nice words, I have to say, while I'm on the green side of the grass. But you know, there's an old saying, one day your life will flash before your eyes, so make sure it's worth watching. Those words indeed run through my thoughts today. It's good advice. We all should try to live out the truth of that wisdom. But my friends, 40 years really is a long time. In some ways, 1969 seems like just yesterday. But in other ways, it seems as distant as a flapper or a tri-corner hat. Officially, I'm the longest continually serving alderman from the same ward in Chicago history. The legend of the Cullerton family, Edward Foxy Ed Cullerton, did serve 41 years, but from a variety of wards, and of course not continuously. From 1871 to 1875, he represented the 7th Ward. From 1876 to 1888, he represented the 6th Ward. From 1888 to 1892, from the 9th Ward, and again from 1898 to 1900 in the 9th Ward, and from 1901 till 1920 from the 11th Ward. Many of you were not even born 40 years ago, although I do see someone here today who actually voted for me on March 11th, 1969. Thank you very much, Ann. You may remember that gas was 35 cents a gallon in 1969. You could buy a jar of peanut butter for 85 cents. Bread for 20 cents a loaf, and eggs were 49 cents a dozen. Chicago had 4 daily newspapers then: the Tribune, the Sun-Times, the Chicago American, and the Daily News. And the salary of a Chicago alderman was $8,000 a year, $1,640 a year less than I earned as a Chicago police officer. Richard Nixon became President of the United States that year, while Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the surface of the moon. Golda Meir of Milwaukee became the Prime Minister of Israel, and a bloodless coup deposed King Idris in Libya. 350,000 young Americans showed up at a farm in Woodstock, New York, and made music history. Neither Ann nor I attended that gathering. Strangely, it seems to have been the year of the anagram. PBS was established. The PLO was organized. The first ATM machine was installed in the United States, and the U.S. Air Force declared that there was no evidence of UFOs. The world of 1969 was bell-bottomed and tie-dyed. Another fashion trend I passed up. Butch Cassidy, Midnight Cowboy, Funny Girl, True Grit, and Easy Rider were in the movie theaters. Britain sent troops to Northern Ireland that year. Walmart was incorporated. The first troop withdrawals began in Vietnam, and the Selective Service instituted a lottery for the draft. You might also recall that 1969 was the year when a black cat walked behind the Cubs' on-deck circle in Shea Stadium. Some fans blamed that incident and the ensuing errors by center fielder Don Young and captain Ron Santo as the reason for the Cubs' devastating collapse that season. The Rolling Stones, James Brown, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, Pink Floyd, Elton John, and David Bowie added a soundtrack for our lives. And in the midst of all of that, I was a candidate for the office of Alderman of the 14th Ward. I was actually 25 years old when I was elected. Only Colonel Robert McCormick was younger than me, 24 years old, when he became a member of the City Council in 1904. In that race, I had 6 opponents: Hilda Chemler, Mark Crosby, George S. Esch, Elizabeth George, James Osinski, and John Patrick Tully. I received 11,209 votes and defeated my closest opponent by an average of 10 to 1. Incidentally, that John Tully that I defeated in that election currently serves as a justice of the Illinois Appellate Court. My father, Joe Burke, as Jay indicated, had held that seat in the City Council since 1953 until his death in May of 1968. He replaced Alderman Clarence Wagner, the powerful chairman of the Finance Committee, and after his death in a tragic automobile accident in northern Wisconsin, the City Council scheduled a special election. Amazingly, with the death of Clarence Wagner, the political destinies of 2 Chicago families changed forever. Back then, Democrats were becoming increasingly disenchanted with the 2-term mayor of Chicago, Martin Kennelly. Some historians believe that Wagner appeared to possibly have the edge to replace Kennelly in the mayoral election of 1955. Of course, following Clarence Wagner's death, Democrats turned to the chairman of the Cook County Democratic Central Committee, Richard J. Daley, a county clerk and rising star in the Cook County democracy. Daley, of course, defeated Martin Kennelly in the 1955 Democratic primary and went on to win election for mayor. To replace Clarence Wagner as Alderman of the 14th Ward, my dad, Joe Burke, was chosen to run for the office in November of 1953. I think it's a fair observation to say that with these events, life would never be the same either in the households of the Burkes or the Daleys. I was 10 years old the first time I met Mayor Richard J. Daley. It was at a St. Patrick's Day parade in 1954. He was still county clerk then, but I knew he was an important political figure. My father was always taking me places and introducing me to people. Funny thing about that parade, for years I thought the most important thing about what happened that day was getting to ride home in a fire chief's car and ringing the bell and the siren. It's no exaggeration to say that since my election on March 11th, 1969, I've occupied a front row seat to view Chicago history, like it or not. I've served in the City Council with 7 Chicago mayors: Richard J. Daley, Michael Bilandic, Jane Byrne, Harold Washington, David Orr, Eugene Sawyer, and Richard M. Daley. During this time, I've served with 224 aldermanic colleagues. On March 14, 1969, City Clerk John C. Marson administered the oath of office to Fred Hubbard of the 2nd Ward, Michael Belandic of the 11th Ward, Terry Gabinski of the 32nd Ward, and myself. Bill Singer would join us in the City Council later after a runoff election. At that meeting, the Journal reveals that Alderman Tom Keene proposed a motion out of the regular order of business permitting television equipment to record the proceedings. The measure was actually the first I ever voted on after debate with Leon Dupre. It was adopted. Also present on that occasion was the Lord Mayor of Waterford, William Jones, from the Daly Ancestral Home in Ireland. Of course, this was just 3 days before St. Patrick's Day. My mother was also present for the occasion, as were the widows of 2 previous 14th Ward aldermen, Mrs. James J. McDermott, Mrs. Clarence Wagner. Minnie Belandic, Mike's mother, was present, along with the Belandic family. Terry Gabinski's parents were there with his uncle Leo. When I came to the council, of course, it was largely a closed operation run by Tom Keene and a few of his closest associates. In those days, it was rare that anyone he did not designate could even rise to speak on a matter. That was the way it was. They didn't need any help and did not encourage very much activity. At 25 years of age, I was not about to try to tip over the apple cart. Nothing much happened until the arrival of Ed Verdoliak in 1971. Together with Wilson Frost, we engineered what was then called the Coffee Rebellion, in which we demanded a larger voice in the council from Alderman Keene. We made some bold demands at that time, and a scaled-back mutiny planned at our early morning coffees at the Sherman House. We wanted some assurances that legislation we might propose would be at least considered, as well as having access to briefing sessions in advance of council meetings. Remarkably, we actually achieved some of those demands, and things began to change. Many of the aldermen with whom I've had the privilege to have served have been larger-than-life personalities whose own careers have been powerful threads reaching back into Chicago history. You, of course, recall names like the powerful floor leader Tom Keene, Ralph Metcalf, the Olympic gold medalist from the Berlin Games in 1936, and later a member of the United States Congress, Tom Fitzpatrick, Gene Callahan's father-in-law, Paul Sheridan, Leon Dupre, who just turned 100 last year, Vito Marzullo from the West Side, Seymour Simon, later of the County Board and the Illinois Supreme Court, Paul Wagoda, Harry Sane, John Holen, Jack Sperling, Tony Lorino, George Collins, later a congressman killed in a tragic 1972 Midway Airport plane crash, who, of course, was the husband of Cardis Collins, who succeeded him. Curiously, there were 4 undertakers in the city council then. A. Sammy Rayner, Robert Biggs, Robert Brandt, and the inimitable Casey Laskowski. Some of my colleagues have been part of generational legacies like me. In addition to 2 Burkes, over the years, there have been 4 Cullertons, 2 Maneiruses, 2 Ogdens, 2 Holens, 2 Knickerbockers, 2 Bowlers, 2 Bowlers, 2 Clarks, 2 Brants, 3 Keens, 2 Sheridans, 2 Verdoliaks, 2 Austins, 2 Beavers, and 2 Lorinos. Between 1837 and 1847, members of the council served just 1-year terms. That was lengthened to 2 years at 1847. From 1839 to 1922, 35 wards elected 2 aldermen each. In 1923, each ward was restricted to 1 alderman, each elected for a 2-year term. The present system of 1 alderman elected for 4 years was established in 1935. with the election of the 92nd City Council. As you can see, like most things in Chicago, the City Council evolved over the course of time with its history adjusting to the shape of the times. That's why I believe it's important to study history, to examine it, and to understand the manner in which events and institutions have come to occur. Nothing is written in stone, especially in politics. But without the ability to comprehend the synthesis of history, how the whole thing fits together, much can and is lost. This is important particularly when, as members of a legislative body, we have the opportunity on occasions to learn from the mistakes of the past. It has been said, to know the truth of history is to realize its ultimate myth and its inevitable ambiguity. In the council, I've had the privilege to represent a historic constituency in the 14th Ward, and as committeeman lead the 14th Ward Regular Democratic Organization. That term, Regular Democrat, expresses a construct of political loyalty within the Democratic Party here in Chicago that goes back decades. In our own ward, its meeting began with the establishment of a solid political organization in the 1930s by former Alderman James J. McDermott and appellate court judge John J. Sullivan. In some ways, a regular Democrat is like an Orthodox Catholic, a member tried and true, a faithful loyalist with little affection for mavericks or those of questionable allegiances. This is a cohesion that holds the team together, and if you test the veracity of its impact, take the example of John Fitzgerald Kennedy in the 1960 election in Illinois. It bears out that wisdom. Life must be lived forward, but it can only be understood backwards. When I was elected to the City Council on March 11, 1969, the John Hancock Building was just rising. The Sears Tower was merely a drawing on Skidmore's workroom drafting table. There was no Blue Line to O'Hare, no Orange Line to Midway, no Millennium Park, no cell phones, no cable TV, no Watergate, and no Shackman decree. As you might expect, over the course of 4 decades, I sometimes feel as if I've seen it all. Like the time in the council meeting, the 25th Ward Alderman Vito Marzullo was dozing off during the meeting in the middle of a reading of a memorial resolution honoring a longtime city official who had passed away. Vito suddenly awoke and jumped up and said, "I want to wish him good health, success, and happiness." Much to the astonishment of the grieving family who were sitting there in the gallery. As Garrison Keillor reminds us, it is a shallow life that doesn't give a person a few scars. I think you could say we were scar-covered in Miami in 1972 when the party regulars were unseated at the Democratic National Convention. George McGovern's forces engineered the ouster of our delegation from the convention, including Mayor Daley and myself. We were replaced by the McGovern delegates led by Jesse Jackson and Billy Singer. That event arguably marked a loss in power and influence for Chicago Democrats. But given Mayor Daley's long-standing loyalty and public stature in the Democratic Party, McGovern still received the full support of the Cook County Democracy. The McGovern-Shriver ticket, of course, went down in flames as Richard Nixon was reelected. In January 1975, longtime Southside Congressman John C. Kluczynski passed away. I wanted to fill the vacancy, so I called Tom Donovan to make an appointment to see Mayor Daley. I told the mayor how I thought I'd be a good candidate, why I was electable. He listened attentively and then patted me on the hand and said, "Eddie, Congress is not for you." Of course I was disappointed. I had not expected that the mayor would rain so hard on my parade. But of course, Mayor Daley had an infallible political insight. He was right. Washington was not for me. And I would like to think that my growing understanding of Chicago's municipal governance was something he thought should remain at home. I suspect no event in Chicago's recent history was more serious than the death of Mayor Daley on December 20th, 1976. As many of us recall, the mayor began that day with a pre-Christmas breakfast with his department heads. At the event, Mayor and Mrs. Daley were given 2 round-trip tickets to Ireland, with which they were delighted. They remarked how much they were looking forward to going to Ireland. After a full morning schedule, even an appearance in the 10th Ward shooting baskets with Eddie Verdoliak, the mayor went to his doctor's office on North Michigan Avenue and there suddenly succumbed to a massive heart attack. Personally, and for so many Chicagoans, it was difficult to reconcile that this giant of a man would no longer lead Chicago. And I will confess that I owed him my political start. I enjoyed a somewhat solemn and paternal relationship with the man with whom my predecessors were cautious allies. My father had not been part of Tom Keene's inner circle, but Mayor Daley, after my father's death, signaled that he wanted me to be the committeeman and the alderman, and so it happened. And I will confess, there was never a moment during the years that I knew the mayor when a piano was nearby that I gave up an opportunity to play his favorite song, "There's a Dear Little Town in the Old County Down." Politically, I believe I'm correct in saying that in spite of the terrible shock of his death, we also felt a certain confidence that the city, the members of the council, would be able to survive what appeared at the time to be cataclysmic. There was, you'll remember, a push to have Wilson Frost named as acting mayor. Some tense negotiations began between Daley loyalists and the Frost supporters. These actually took place on the neutral ground of my LaSalle Street law office. In the end, Mike Bolandic was elected acting mayor, and Wilson Frost became chairman of the Committee on Finance, with, of course, you'll remember, Terry, the official chairman's Cadillac limousine. That sealed the deal, to be frank. Over the 40 years that I've served, I have, as Jay pointed out, not been alone in this political journey. At my side has always been my wife of 41 years, Ann. Her diligence and her intelligence has not only made her an extraordinary lawyer and now a justice of the Illinois Supreme Court, her character makes her a spectacular wife, mother, and grandmother. She has made these 40 years so endurable and enjoyable. And for that, I'm grateful. Two of our 5 children are here today. Our daughter, Sarah, who's an assistant state's attorney. Sarah, will you stand up? Our son, Eddie, I saw him earlier. Eddie. Jennifer is also a lawyer. She's not here. Travis is in school. And, of course, the memory of Emmett, who has gone home to God, is always in our minds, in our hearts. I also want to publicly acknowledge the loyal support of the people who have made it possible for me to serve these 40 years, and those are the loyal men and women of the 14th Ward Regular Democratic Organization. And I have said so many times, I could never have done that without Pete Andrews, who's been with me, alongside me for all those years. An ailing Senator Ted Kennedy said recently, "We know the future will outlast all of us, but I believe that all of us will live on in the future we make." There's great wisdom in those words. Looking ahead to the future, I'm enthused and encouraged by Chicago's energy and determination. We will hope to continue to let it shape the path before us and that which we must do. For as Robert Frost writes, I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Thank you all very much for your kind attention. Your Honor.
All right, please be seated, and under your chairs there are paper and pens. The exam will begin in 2 minutes. It'll be multiple choice and essay. A little history lesson. By the way, that video should probably be made and given to the Historical Society. That's really... Teresa, anyone? Anyone with any guts out there to ask a question?
Just so long as you don't bring up that guy that asked the question of Roland Burris last time I was here.
Alderman, he's in the reporter witness protection. We have one question. I have a lot of questions, but by the way, I was at Ann's opening special Olympic thing and the one afterwards. And you all know that my wife went to school with Anna Maria, so 40 years I've been married too, and a lot of this sounded familiar. All right, this is from, the Lawrence Spivak of the City Club, Amy Sue Mertens. That's only for you aging baby boomers who remember Lawrence Spivak, right? What is the city doing to secure stable funding for CAN TV in the future? Posner, she's gone.
We actually have a proposal pending, and I heard from the sponsor, Alderman Bernie Stone, that he seems to have reached an accommodation with the administration, and I'm hopeful that we'll have some positive news about the very near future.
Alderman, after that performance, there really isn't need to any questions. All I can say is that someone who studied history like you for a long time, written a lot of books on history, well, the most amazing thing is that there's not a long memory about what's going on. Ms. Waitzer will have to have it for the exam next week. But to have that and have you talk about it, much of what you said reflects why the city has made Indianapolis, Minneapolis, St. Louis sort of second-class citizens in the Midwest. So I thank you all very much. We are adjourned.
Thank you.